Welcome to Living the Reclaim Life podcast. I'm Denisha. We're glad you're here for conversations that revive hope, inspire healing, and encourage you to live a vibrant life with Christ. So grab a cup of coffee as we chat with today's guest. Today, I am so excited to introduce you to my friend Robin Blumenthal. Robin is a trainer, a speaker, an author, a coach, and just an amazing, amazing woman. And I'm so excited for you to get to know her today. She has so much experience in trauma-informed care. And so today we're going to talk about the tension that we experience, at particular in this season of life, where we are coming out of COVID. We have our kids' emotions, we have our emotions. And in all of that tension, we know that God is in it. And so, Robin, I'm so excited to have you and all of your experience on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much, Denisha. I am thrilled to be here. I am especially excited and proud of the work that Reclaim Story is doing. And I am just amazed at how God has taken things from each of us, from our hearts, and then drawn us into new areas. And it's always amazing when we follow his lead and his plan. I prefer sometimes an email that would lay it all out, but that's not really how God works. But I have loved seeing how he's working in and through you. And I'm just honored to be here today.
Robin, we have such similar stories. Robin and I were both in full-time ministry at different churches. And I had so much fun working with you. I think we figured it was at least 4 to 6 years, somewhere in that. We're on the team that planned the Ignite Ministry Conference here in Tucson for children's ministry leaders. And then this last year, we got to work together for Reclaiming Hope, which was a trauma-informed conference. I love how all of the different ways that we got to work with professionals in so many different areas, from ministry to first responders, and that was a great experience. So both of us, coming from full-time ministry, get this crazy idea from God to leave our positions, right? Go in different directions. And through both of our different directions, we found the world of trauma and how that impacts our lives. So I love the heart intersection that we've had in the world of trauma. When I first got introduced to what trauma looks like, I was sitting with Robin. She was doing a fantastic parenting course, Love and Logic, for our church. And we'd invited her over to come and teach our parents. And we were sitting beforehand eating dinner. And I remember you telling me about your passion for just being trauma-informed and what that meant and how that changed your view on so many things, understanding things through a trauma-informed lens. So that night, you sparked something in me, because here we are, both in such a huge area of trauma. And based on your experience and working with kids in the past, you recently wrote a book. Tell us a little bit about that.
I wrote the book, Where in the Zoo Are You? Came really out of the pandemic, to be honest. I mean, I always thought, it'd be great to write a children's book, but this was not the book I was thinking about writing. And I was working with a group out in Vail on a social emotional learning with educators. And they were talking about the various experiences that kids were having during the pandemic. And I was hearing on the one end, certainly we know statistically there's been an increase in abuse and an increase in suicides, an increase in people not feeling connected, kids not going to school, right? Even if it's virtual, just not really being all present. So on the one side, you have people who are really worried about the welfare of kids. And then the next day, I might talk to somebody who would say something like, my doctor said, if I go outside, I will get COVID and die. And then the next day I might be talking to somebody who said, if we just had enough faith, we wouldn't need to wear a mask. So as I was looking at the tension, right, in all of that, and watching all the different finger pointing or even shame feeling, because sometimes we're just, as we walk into a place, I was, to be honest, in the beginning of the pandemic, I was one of those people that I thought, I can't believe we're not going to have schools for 2 weeks. That seems a little overboard. And here we are almost a year later, right? If only I knew. And the reality is that it's really, in my mind, less about whether we think we should or shouldn't wear a mask, or should or shouldn't get vaccinated, but how we respond to somebody who has a very strong opinion or a strong feeling or a fear or whatever it is. Because if I respond to you saying, Denisha, you should be ashamed that you're not wearing a mask, or that you are wearing a mask, or that you did or didn't get vaccinated. The point is, if I make you feel judged and shamed, we hurt our relationship. And so in writing the story of the zoo, Where in the Zoo Are You? It takes place where there's a flood. And in the flood, the animals have all had a different experience. Some of the animals have been very fearful. The giraffes, for example, had been, up to water, up to their necks for the 10 days it took before it was safe enough for the zookeepers to come in. The gorillas had gotten out of their cage, so they were having a grand old time. In fact, we're kind of making fun of some of the animals. There's anxiety, there was worry, there was actual trauma. And the whole idea of it is that when a family reads the book together, or a classroom, or even I've had adults say they've talked about the book together, where they just kind of said, where in the zoo are you? Where have you been during this pandemic? And where are you now? And how might I help? Or how can I at least understand? Empathy is about perspective taking. And I think it's important that we understand that even if we've all been through the same trauma, even if we're in the same car accident, for example, as a trauma in that, we don't have the same perspective. It might make you never want to get behind a car again, or behind the wheel of a car again. And it might make me say, hey, it was no big deal. It's about where we were sitting in the car, what we were thinking or doing at the time. And so if I respond to you like it was no big deal, you're fine, that's not going to help you get better if I can't relate and try to tap into some of what's really happening within inside you. And so the book basically was the whole idea of how do we walk that tension, and how do we be there for others and listen with some questions and answers so that we can really hear how somebody's doing.
And it's so fantastic to have that type of a book written for children too. Because not only is it good for us adults as we read it to the kids or read it with them, but it's such a great perspective to have kids coming out of this, just the season, this last year and a half almost now, or over a year for sure, to have their perspective aligned, right? Because they're seeing adults do things that they probably didn't see adults do before, maybe with just such division and such strong opinions. I mean, we may have had strong opinions about some things, but to have it so universal and have people so divided over things.
And when you add the political, climate that was happening, that George Floyd and all the racism came during that too. And certainly, and I'm not saying all those things don't have to be addressed. They certainly do. But the way we can address them, if we can come together, and if I can understand how you're feeling and you can understand how I'm feeling. And as a child, if I have words to express how I'm feeling, it'll give you insight. Because if I understand the need that's driving your behavior, we talk about this a lot in parenting classes that I teach. If I understand the need that's driving your behavior, I can respond differently and perhaps get us to where we both want to go, a stronger relationship or the direction we want to go. But if I'm just going to judge the behavior I see, I once heard that we tend to judge our actions, we judge our intentions. But when you do something, I judge your actions, right? Because I know my intentions were for good. But your actions, I don't know what your intentions were. And I tend to look on the actions rather than on that intention. So the need driving the behavior is really important. And it gives us a better window when we're trying to work with somebody in trauma, or even being compassionate about ourselves. What is that need that's driving my behavior to act out in a certain way?
Oh, that's so good. That's really good. I remember one of the things that we learned at the trauma conference was that we present ourselves in situations based on how much trauma we've had. So if we're coming, I think the example that you gave in one of the trainings was if a child comes to school and has a piece of paper wadded up and tossed at them, they might go, and keep going. And then, or that same exact person might have a piece of paper wadded up, tossed at them, and come absolutely unhinged, and security has to get involved. And all of that based on what they showed up with, as far as their trauma cup or things that they'd experienced beforehand. So I think we're seeing a lot of that also. If I've experienced a family member who has, passed away from COVID, or if I've lost somebody in this, I'm going to be a lot more on high alert, if you will, kind of in that red zone than maybe somebody who hasn't had anybody in their immediate world affected by the pandemic.
Absolutely. In fact, I've done one live class during COVID. I've done many classes virtual, and I happened to be doing a live class. And it was a small class. Everybody was spaced apart about, the 6 feet. There was maybe 12 or 14 adults in there. And I had just got through saying that I had wore my mask during check-in, right? And then I was standing far enough back. I asked the front row, "Are you okay?" Because presenting loudly with wearing a mask sometimes can be a little harder. Well, a lady walked in late. And so I told everybody, turn to page 7. And I turned to check her in, forgetting that I didn't have my mask on. She was wearing a mask. And she said, "You guys aren't wearing masks. If you had lost 4 relatives to COVID, you would wear a mask." And oh gosh, so I explained how we had just had it. But that's the whole thing. If she hadn't said that and had just stopped with, "You're not wearing masks," I might have jumped to a conclusion like you are living in fear or you don't understand. This was before anybody was really having the vaccine. But that's the thing. We don't wear that. Sometimes I have thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we all walked around with a clear backpack so that somebody could see all the things inside that we're carrying? Like you said, we're bringing, whether we were abused or abandoned or alone or dealing with a mother who has cancer at home. If all of that could be visible on the outside, we would respond to people different. But we don't have that. Most people aren't going to share that, or they don't feel safe enough. But I would say that the thing we can do is we can all assume that there's more to the story, that there's more, that there's that, again, that need driving the behavior, and that there is more underneath the iceberg. The part of the iceberg that sunk the Titanic wasn't what they saw. It was what was underneath. And they made the assumption that what they saw was plenty fine, right? Or they could get around it or whatever. But that's the thing, is that we really need to assume when we are with individuals, especially when their behavior doesn't make sense to us, that we can probably assume there is more to that story. And even if I don't know the story, I can respond with empathy and compassion and kindness that helps you to feel safe. And perhaps I might learn more of the story, or at least you will feel that I'm a safe person as you work through your own story.
It's so important to hold that space for people. I think at times we're quick to speak, and sometimes we're not always the best listeners, or to just hold empty space for someone to actually, we feel like we're in such a rush in just the world, right? We're rushing to get from here to there. And I remember at the beginning of COVID, I thought the days are so long, like we're stuck at home. And now as things have ramped up, so we sort of built our world online. Right now we're starting to go out again. So now our real world's coming back. And I think there's just a tension in our time of are we in person? Are we online? And that connection piece to real people and connecting with them in person, we are quicker and rushed a little more. Our coffee dates might not be as long or might not even happen. So how do you create space for people to be able to show that empathy and compassion and hear kind of what they're carrying in their backpack that we don't get to see?
It's not, and I don't want, if anyone who are my family or my kids would say, "Oh, don't ask her. She doesn't always do it right." I absolutely don't. Really.
None of us do. It's the intention, Robin. It's the intention.
Exactly. I'm doing my best. But one of the things that I've learned just on that note really is self-compassion. Brene Brown and Kristen Neff talk a lot about, they're great authors and researchers on that whole idea of empathy. But one of it is on that self-compassion. So sometimes, just as a side note, when we don't respond the way we wish we could have, or the way we wanted to have, or whatever, it's always when you go back and say, I wasn't there for you. I wasn't the listener I wanted to be. I didn't respond the way I wanted to. So not only can I come to you and apologize for that, but I can also have self-compassion to say I was doing the best I could. Not that I have to tell you that, but because sometimes we judge our own selves so harshly, right?
Oh, that's yes.
And so for me, I have really learned during the pandemic, one of the things I've been working on is I have to be a little more cognizant that I'm doing the best I can as well. And there are days where that is better or worse, and having that self-compassion and being curious as to my own behavior. But your question, I think, was, if I remember now that I finished that part, was how do we hold space for somebody?
Yeah.
Right. How do we be there? I think one of the things that's really hard is when I want to be there with somebody, or I want to walk beside somebody, or I want to encourage them, or I want to be a good listener. Sometimes it's really hard because my desire for that person, whether I'm their mentor, whether I'm their friend, whether I'm their parent, a coworker, my desire is that you fully embrace everything that God's created you to be, right? And I might easily say, well, you should quit that job and get another job, right? Or you should go to college because that's going to be your best option. Or you should stop doing drugs because this is getting nowhere. Like I might want to say or think those things. And if you were to say, I'm going to keep doing drugs, or I'm not going to college, or I'm not going to quit my job, or I'm not going to leave that abusive relationship, sometimes the person who's trying to offer help can get so emotionally tied into that that it's hard, because then I take it as a personal affront, right? Well, then I don't know why you're talking to me. I don't know why you're telling me this story. I don't know what you want me to do for you. So it's a really fine line between letting you own what's yours and letting me own what's mine and letting God own the rest. It's that tightrope of tension. So if I can help communicate to you that I am a safe place and I am there for you, and I can be mindful of my steadiness or the way I might communicate love to you and not take it personally. There's an acronym, if you think of a Q-tip, quit taking it personally.
That's good.
And a lot of times when we're dealing with, I have an adopted daughter, along with my older 4 kids, but my adopted daughter, there are times where I really just have to take a deep breath and go, don't take this personally. Just because she said, last night I made a new recipe I thought was pretty good, she's like, oh, that was bad. Don't ever do that again. It's like, okay, then. And honestly, I never said I was a cook. I don't even like to cook. Like, so part of me was like, oh my gosh, trying to not be offended. And the other part of me is like, you know what? I don't have to own that. You don't like the chicken. That's fine. And whether it should or shouldn't be liked, it doesn't really even matter. But if I can love you anyway, even when you say things like that, sometimes that allows me to have more space for you, because if I get too invested, then I can start to resent those comments, right? Like, well, you should at least be thankful that I had dinner ready on the table, right?
Yes, that would be what I would be thinking.
Exactly. And going down that road is never going to win it's just not going to help us, right? It's not going to help build our relationship. So I think that we can hold space sometimes by being present and being there as a listener, but not own some of the things that someone might try to either put on us or things we just don't have any control over. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it sure does. And I think too, by not owning their response, that creates a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
You did not take that personally and say, okay, she didn't like the chicken. That's all right. So next time I'll do something different for her, or next time we'll just have the chicken that she doesn't like. Like that's okay. Right. That creates a both and. That creates okay, you can have your opinion, I can have my opinion, but we don't have to convince one another that one is right and one is wrong. That's kind of
which is so tension. Hard, right?
Yes.
The fixer, because I'm like, let me tell you all the way. So today she did text me, what's for dinner tonight? And I said, well, remember, Dad and I are going out. We're having a little date night. And I said, so you can have the chicken you didn't like, or I said, name some of the other things. So her response was, okay. So I don't know what that meant, but I thought either way, I don't need to try to own that, because there's so many things in life that I really can't own. No matter how much my intentions are to help you or help my kids or help my coworkers, or even if I have all the answers in the world, which obviously I don't, but the reality is I still can't force you to make good choices. Right. And so sometimes it comes down to that and understanding that just being there for somebody, just being a safe place for them to come. I've been coaching a friend who's just going through some really hard stuff after a really hard childhood. And there's many times I will say, she'll ask for my advice. I will say, well, here's what I would do. She will, that's not possible. And I have to just work so hard to not say, well, it would be possible if you just did X, right? Because that's what I think, but I know that's not going to help, because she has to come to that. And I say something like, well, I'll be praying for you, or I love you, or I'll be here, whatever you decide, so that she knows there is a safe place to go to, because I know that relationship and a safety and trusting relationships like that, that's what helps people heal through trauma, or even get through trauma, to know that there is somebody who will be there regardless of the decisions that an individual makes.
Even the statistics on if you have one person in your life that creates that safe place for you, that the statistics of recovery in trauma, I forget the exact numbers, but they are huge, of just
Absolutely.
being able to have that one person who says, I will stand beside you. Just like you're creating kind of I hear like you describing a no judgment zone. Okay,
Right.
there's not a judgment here, but I'm going to be here for you tomorrow.
And that's all of us. That tension is all of me. I think of, interestingly enough, I know this is a podcast, so you can't see, but I was born with a lazy eye, right? And so when I grew up, there was, considering many people's trauma small, but the kids would say like, oh, there's the one-eyed monster, or during Greek mythology, there's Cyclops. And I used to, obviously cry and hate it. And there's the words will never hurt. Well, words do hurt, right? We do know that, certainly. But here's one of the things is I have now grown up. I have finally put a word. People would often over the years as a pastor come to me and they would be talking and they would share some horrific something that happened in their past. And they would say, I've never told anyone that. And I would think, I don't know why I mean, it's okay that you told me, but I would think, I don't know what, because I don't look like I've lived that life. And I wondered what it was about it that made them feel safe. But I think it's that empathy and that willing to be there. And as I have become older, I've looked and I think if I had not grown up that way, I would not have that piece of understanding another perspective, what it must be like to be on the outside, or trying to understand how other people's story might affect what they bring to their table. So I look at how God took what something seemed, was times that I hated, right? But as an adult, that same piece is what allows me, I think, to be good at what I do, because I was able to take both the negative things in the past and what God is showing me through those and have that tension together with God in the middle, if that kind of makes sense.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. He sure uses our story. And sometimes we don't even realize the lessons that we learn in our story and the hard parts that help us and help other people. I have gotten confused between sympathy and empathy. Talk a little bit about that. I know I have a friend of mine who I am a relentless optimist in a lot of ways. So my go-to response, if someone, and I'm learning my way out of this, right? Like I'm having to deprogram myself. Well, at least this didn't happen. At least this isn't happening. And I'm realizing how terrible of a response that is. So yeah, in that she has taught me, she's like, don't do that thing that you do. I'm like, this is terrible. I'm sorry you're going through this. Stop, right? Like not at least, I have to bite my tongue sometimes because I want to say, but look at the bright side, because that is how I'm wired. And I've learned it can get really annoying. So talk to us a little bit about the difference between that empathy piece and sympathy.
So the best way that I can do it is I would encourage people to look up Brene Brown. She has a short cartoon video on called Empathy, or it might even be called Empathy versus Sympathy, but it is an amazing video. But in that video, she talks about empathy is really the perspective taking, my ability to tap into something in my life that might be close to what you're experiencing, not so that I can say, oh yeah, that's nothing, Denisha. What happened to me was, which sometimes we do, right? Yeah. But if I can tap into that thing that happened, for example, if maybe that goes back to that thing, right? If you've had a really hard life and you're talking about something that's happened, or promiscuity, how you lived a life or whatever, maybe I didn't live like that, but I have been able to feel like I wish I fit in better. Or I would do anything to fit into this crowd. Let's say that might be whatever it is. And if I can tap into that feeling, what it's like to be on the outside, what it's like to lose someone you care about, what it's like to have your dreams crushed, what it's like to put your hope in a person who then doesn't fulfill that and turns against you, right? If I can tap into something, that same feeling, then I can respond with empathy to you because I know a little bit about what it's like to lose that thing, but not making the story about my story, right? Like, oh, let me tell you about my story. And the thing is, I'm with you on the at least. And the reason I've been thinking a lot about why we do that, because I need to back my way out of that as well, is I think sometimes is I want to bring you hope. Really, that's what I'm
Yes.
trying to do. Say, right? It
Right.
could be worse. You could have, at least you still have your job or, whatever. But the thing is most people really just want to be heard. They want to know that someone really hears where they're at. So when we say at least, then we take away from that. And there may be a time where they need to be reminded that it's not really the end of the world. But normally the first response needs to be empathy. I'm so sorry you feel that way, or that must be really hard, or I'm so glad you told me. And I think that's one of the things that I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't make it general. I have to work on all the time. Perhaps others also need to work on that.
Me too. Yeah, those are great responses back. Thank you. Thank you for time. I'm so glad you've told me that. That creates that safe place. That must be really hard. That creates a safe place without us kind of putting that feeling of like, oh, they feel sorry for me. It's like, wow, that must be really hard. That's that identifying piece. Like you mentioned, I appreciate really what you said about being able to relate it to our story in some way. Okay, maybe I've never experienced this particular thing someone's coming to me with. And that could be something they've experienced in their life, or that could even be their perspective on masks or vaccines or politics, right? So I don't experience it that way, but I know I'm really passionate about this thing. So I can listen, I can empathize, and I can just hold that space without having to have someone right or wrong.
Right. And I think, and Brene Brown, be sure to give her the credit for putting this all together in her research. But it's interesting because I have done during the pandemic a lot of reading, and she has been one person who I've been following in terms of some of her books on empathy and shame and judgment. But here's an example of that. I remember the day that Tiger Woods got in his car accident, right? I happened to call my mom. She lives in California. I haven't seen her in a year. And she called she was so frustrated. She said, "You probably haven't heard about this." I said, "No, I haven't." She said, "Well, it is on every news channel." So she tells me he's at that point, I think it was in the ICU. She goes, "And my shows have all been disrupted." So my very first thought was kind of judgment. I knew enough not to say it out loud to her, right? You know how it is with your mom sometimes. But I remember rolling my eyes. If she could have seen me, if it was FaceTime, it wasn't, thinking, oh my gosh, it's your shows, right? And then she said, as she talked more, I started to hear, what is it that's really the issue? What is the need driving that? Was that here she is alone. She has only this one thing that she looks forward to, right? A certain TV show, because it's the pandemic. It's not safe to go outside. So then I started thinking, really what she is saying is, I don't feel safe outside. Like it's really about fear and safety. And then we had to hang up for some reason. And she called back later. And then she said, when your brother died, I had a brother who was hit and killed by a car when he was 14. She said, when he died, the whole world didn't gather around in that news. Nobody was there. And so then it made me think, oh, okay. So really, and it wasn't that she hated Tiger Woods or wanted ill for him at all, but it was really about tapping into, in her mind, just how alone and how the world is. There are so many things, and you can't know what to look forward to, and then tapping into my brother, and you know what I mean? So if I tried to just listen at the end, she said, "Thank you for listening." Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, by the grace of God, that I didn't open my mouth and say, well, Mom, there's probably other TV shows you can watch another day, because it really wasn't about that. But so many times I jump to responding, and I wish it were easier to learn, but it just is so hard to learn that if I want to be there and hold space, then I need to try to tap in. What can I understand about what you're going through? How can I just listen? And likely, a lot of times a person will get to that place. I mean, the next day she was better and said, I probably shouldn't have responded that way. But that was how she was responding, right? My judgment of how she was responding wasn't going to help her. Like, you should be ashamed of yourself. That's not going to help her get to a better place. But if I can be there and hold that space and continue to just be in that relationship, we'll probably have a far better opportunity to get to better places together.
Oh, that's so good. And moving towards each other versus moving away from each other is going to be the result of that. That's so important, that connection piece. One of the things it sounds like also is, earlier you said, you tell yourself, I'm doing the best I can. that you gave yourself that self-compassion to say, I'm doing the best I can. Maybe I need a redo on something. Maybe I need to, I didn't respond the way I wanted to, but giving ourselves that compassion. And I hear that even in that story with your mother, you gave her, she's doing the best she can. She is trapped inside. She wants to watch her shows, to believe the best in other people. And I think Brene talks about that as well, doesn't she?
She does. She talks about that she, for years, didn't realize that she was one of those people who thought they're all probably just jerks out there, not really thinking about that her lens wasn't that people are probably doing the best they can. But it's, it's really interesting in that, because I also have been doing a lot of work with Community Resilience Initiative, and they do a lot of trauma trainings. And my friend Rick does a training talking about the predictive brain. And when I was doing that training, I think it was last summer, we talked about, and since been able to offer it myself now through their program, but the point is our brain begins to predict threat or safety. And the more we go down a road. So if you think about it, that people not doing the best they can, sometimes, like my daughter who grew up in the foster care system, right? She almost always will say something like, that person doesn't like me. Well, how do you know? Oh, I can just tell. Her brain, because there have been so many people in her life who have been against her, automatically predicts that until you prove safe, I'm going to assume you mean harm. Somebody like myself, maybe maybe I didn't grow up with any of that, I might say, gosh, that person looks nice. Or maybe I just don't know that person. So they'll probably be fine until they prove to be unsafe. And knowing that how we judge the people, like that instantaneous, before we even think, first impression, and we look out at the world, helps us to know, do I generally see people as safe, or do I generally see people as a threat? Because that changes how I respond, which in turn changes how that person responds. So even understanding and being curious about our own behavior and having self-compassion, like I tend to think everybody is unsafe because of my past, or because of what I'm going through during COVID, or because it's been such a horrible year. How can I change that going forward, or at least be aware that colors the lens when I go into a new relationship, or when I start to go out into the world again, right? As people begin to make that foray out into live groups, I have a couple times been surprised where I'm like, oh, I feel a little awkward. And I wouldn't have thought that I felt awkward, but I'm like, wow, there's a whole lot of people here. And I think sometimes just being compassionate, like, it's because you're just re-entering in the social world, and it's okay to feel awkward. Like versus, oh my gosh, why would I feel this way? Or why would you not feel that way?
You just made me feel so very normal, because I have found myself in social situations or speaking engagements that are small recently. And I have walked away going, I have gotten so socially awkward. I went from being around people all the time to like, I don't know how to make small talk anymore. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you saying that. So maybe some of our listeners are listening and thinking, socially awkward. Yes, I can relate to that. And maybe they've
our social,
me that way recently.
Right. Our social muscles have to be re-exercised again. Even just how we, like you said, small talk, how we project, do you shake, high five, like all of that awkwardness that was at the beginning of the pandemic, that then we didn't really deal with it because nobody was touching, right? Nobody was even going outside. And now we do that again. So what do we do? And how do we make someone feel comfortable? I remember somebody gave me a big hug. They're like, oh, I don't care what people say, I'm going to hug you. And for me, it was okay. But I thought, I wonder how that would make somebody who is really afraid of being hugged.
Yeah.
And is that dishonoring to them? Because that's not going to help our relationship. I certainly don't want someone to go away and feel really nervous. I want them to feel safe around me. So I might just ask, or I might say, would you like me to put on a mask? Even if I don't think masks are good. Or would you like me to take off my mask if I felt safe doing so? All those things help us to see that other person's perspective. And it's the tension that's going to be around for a while, no matter no matter what we believe or how we think. It's going to be here for a while, and the repercussions are going to be here for a while. So how do we live and do it with grace and love?
Such great questions. Robin, I love your experience in just diving into all this and writing the book and to help prepare kids. You have so much knowledge going into this new era. And even if we didn't have a pandemic, just the lives that we've lived and the trauma we've experienced, how to interact and connect with one another. I appreciate that so much about you.
Thank you.
I think we need to do a part 2 next week. What do you think?
I think it sounds great. I would love to do that.
All right. That would be awesome. Well, Robin, you have a training coming up that you are opening up to our listeners. You guys, I am so excited about this. As you can hear, Robin is so full of great information and experience from being a pastor to now working in trauma-informed, all the things, right? As a trainer, a speaker, author, coach. So if you have an organization and you would like them to become trauma-informed or learn a little bit more about that, we will put Robin's information in the show notes in the description for today. And we are putting together a special training for our listeners. So Robin, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, I'm so excited to do this. Well, the date will be June 16th, and you'll have the link there that you can access. And one of the things we'll talk about, like when life is hard, God is there. When we're living blessed, God is there. And through trauma, pain, healing, and purpose, God is there. That tension, how do we do that together? How can I both love you and set boundaries if I'm in a difficult relationship? How can I protect myself and still love and be there for you? How can I give you control and freedom, but still maintain the control I need? So I think really that question, like what is mine, what is yours, and what is God's?
That's great. Yes.
And it'll be kind of a discussion training so that we can really get some time. It'll be virtual for those that feel more comfortable, and we can have a little bit broader reach, but definitely time for people to kind of weigh in and connect and practice our social muscles again, at least even online.
That's awesome. I look forward to that. So June 16th, we'll have all the information and the sign up in the show notes. Also, you can go to our Facebook page at Reclaimed Story, and we'll have the information starting today on there as well. Robin, thank you so much. And I sure look forward to part 2 with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Denisa.
Thanks for listening. I pray you found hope in today's conversation and maybe even feel a little less alone in your story. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram at Reclaimed Story. Want to learn more about living a reclaimed life and how you can be a part of our growing community of reclaimers? Check out our website at reclaimedstory.com. All of those links and more will be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this inspirational podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That is a huge help in helping us reach more people to live the reclaimed life. Thank you so much for listening.